Hello everyone, and welcome to the showdown between the Dwarves, who are going to be led by a Rune Lord, and the Greenskins, who are going to be led by the Great Green Baconator. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. So as far as the build goes, we're going to be going with the Rune Lord, who's very good against the Greenskins. So firstly, he's dirt cheap. I think when you completely strip him down and just bring the Rune, or the Master Rune, Wrath and Ruin, he costs about 1,000 gold, which allows you to go very wide, which is very important against the Greenskins, because typically they're going to be swarming from every angle, and I find that if you try and go, elite against the Greenskins with like hammers and longbeards and a very heavy infantry core, that they simply just overrun you with the Waaagh. They usually have Black Orcs, and even like, non-heavy armor-piercing troops with the Waaagh can really kind of grind down your front line. So going very wide against the Greenskins, I think, is pretty much a staple in the matchup, and as you can see, I have a very wide force. In the front here, a couple miners with blasting charges just to hold up the army and maybe try and force an early Waaagh. Sometimes players will see red, and when they see the first troops engaging in the front line, they'll just pop the Waaagh, which is very nice. Top of that, we got Dwarf Warriors with great weapons here in the secondary line, with one group of miners here in the middle, just kind of ran out of gold. So we have 3 layers here, right? Or I guess multiple, more than that. So a layer here, we have one here, and if they do get through this line, which they most likely will eventually because Greenskin infantry are very good, they're going to get to your Thunders, but then you pull in the reserves. The Longbeards with great weapons, they are going to lose to Black Orcs head-to-head and to a lot of different Greenskin infantry. But for the most part, if you pull them in, the Greenskins are already a little bit tattered and softened up from the ruins and the Thunders and things like that. They can just do some heavy lifting for sure. In the back, we got BUGMAN's Rangers. These guys are great against Greenskins as well. Typically, they're going to have lightly armored troops. The Rusty Heirs in the back line. Orc Boar Boys don't really have the best, defensive stats against missiles. You can see here, these guys, they have like bronze shields, but low armor, so it's still pretty cost effective. In the back, we have one group of Dwarf Warriors, 2 Slayers in total, I think. So Slayers here, and then we do have the Dragonback Slayers, I believe, on the other side, which are quite good against Greenskins. You need to make sure that you don't run them up against, goblins and like troops like that. They're going to, be able to win, but they're going to take a ton of damage, and it is not a cost-effective trade. So typically I put one group of Dwarf Warriors on the flank, which are going to be mixed in with Slayers. So then you engage, you can fight goblins, squigs can come in. Oftentimes people use squigs and nasty skulkers on the flank. So the goblins or the Dwarf Warriors hold them in place while the Slayers kind of take down the squigs, which is quite powerful. So that's pretty much it for my force. Definitely a very thick Jawi army. And a super unorthodox army for my opponent. Yeah, Savage Orc Bigans on the flanks. Now, these guys are an anti-large unit, but they still have really raw, just overwhelming combat stats. 45 weapons rank, super high melee attack, which actually can punch through the flanks of the dwarves. So these guys would struggle against heavily armored like Longbeards or Dwarf Warriors. I mean, they'll beat Dwarf Warriors pretty badly, but if they come up and around the flanks and actually pressure, they can do okay. I've seen these Savage Orc Bigans do well. If you look at regular Savage Orcs, I mean, the stat difference is pretty substantial. So yeah, I don't know if they're like... Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen them work pretty well against like Dwarf Warriors, and I honestly feel like Savage Orc Bigans might be able to beat Longbeards. Maybe not the shielded variant, but probably the Great Open variant. He's got Skulkers backing those guys up, so obviously he's bringing in his armor piercing there. Same thing on the other side, a couple of groups of Orc Boar Boys, which are mobile and armor piercing, so really not a bad choice against the Jawi here. And he's got Savage Orcs in the front line and a whole lot of like Night Goblin stuff that you normally wouldn't think is very like good in this matchup. Really the more optimal way, I think, to play against the Dwarves. I mean, granted, I've seen builds like this work very well, and you guys will see this game is super intense. But just going very heavy with Black Orcs, Squigs, and Skulkers seems to be super effective. But nonetheless, in the back, it looks like he does have the Baconator. So the Baconator is going to be buffing pretty hardcore with Ere We Go, and it looks like he does have the Headbutt, and it looks like Waaagh, and all of his good items. And he does have Rusty Heirs and a firing squad in the back. And the Orc Air Boys have better armor piercing than Goblins, so that's why you typically see those guys. But yeah, very interesting army, so quite excited to show you guys. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. So over here in the flank, the Orc Boars do a little bit of a screen. They're running across to get around my army, but I did use a rune on them, the Master Rune, to kind of pound them down, and I also do get a very good Thunder volley on them. So there was no like Black Orcs or super elite infantry aside from the Savage Orc Bigans. So I was like, you know what, let's work down the mobile units so then I can have potentially a better control over the whole game. So the Orc Waaagh is going to be descending here. The miners are going to be going forth with the blasting charges. First volley is going down to the far side, hitting these Savage Orcs, doing some, not much damage at all. I mean, they're a little bit late on the blasting charges, but a big volley comes in, and it definitely does a little bit of work against the Savage Orcs. But for the most part, miners just have such bad combat stats, and they also took a ton of firepower. Now the frontline engagement's underway, so the miners take the initial charge, so I just send a blob of miners here just to kind of hold up this charge. From here, I'm going to be sending in the Longbeards and the Dwarf Warriors and some of those other troops, but basically I'm just looking, I'm like, okay, where's the kill box? Here we have a nice little firing range. So the Savage Orcs are pretty prime targets right now, so we're just going to be firing all our guns in. So the BUGMAN's Rangers, everyone going in, the Waaagh has been popped, and the Dwarf Warriors are going to be rushing forward. Now this group trying to rush through the middle, whenever you see someone and you want to turn all guns about face, you can see the Rune Lord's going to be charging in, just epic stuff. BUGMAN's Rangers in the back overwatching, and we should be able to just mow these guys down, just sheer firepower from the Jawi arsenal here. So the BUGMAN's Rangers are now shooting into these guys, the Rune Lord breaks their charge, and you can see this other group of Longbeards is going to be rushing in as well. In the meantime, this one group of Thunders is going to be shooting at the Goblin Big Boss, who is a little bit open right there. Savage Orcs in the front just smashing into my Dwarf lines, but honestly, they're really kind of pounding out my Dwarf Warriors in the flanks. I mean, my miners were there as a bit of a distraction card effects, but it's looking a little bit scary. Headbutt's going to be going down here as well, and that actually does some pretty decent damage. I haven't seen that used too much, but yeah, it wasn't bad at all. In the back, my opponent had a really nice squeeze through right there. So he actually put them in a bit of a narrow formation and charged through. And you can see my dwarves are a little bit too slow to stop those guys. So I'm going to be taking a pretty big little Wolf Rider charge here in the back. And he actually had a pretty big vanguard of those guys. I forgot to show you. But nonetheless, the Thunders are going to put up a good fight. And I will be having some troops collapsing inward right now. But yeah, he's got Wolf Riders everywhere. Savage Orcs coming in on the flanks. And you can see these Dwarf Warriors, Skulkers plus these Savage Orc Biggins with 45 weapon strength. They're just pounding through the Dwarf Warriors. Nonetheless, they're holding relatively well, but it's looking pretty messy for sure. So Dwarf Warriors, BUGMAN's Rangers just kind of shooting in. The Goblin Wolf Riders, of course, have compromised my position, but the battle is very, very close. In the front line, yeah, these Dwarf Warriors are just getting destroyed. Longbeards with Grey Opens have had to be pulled in here, essentially, just to kind of, get my security back in the front line. Warzog, of course, is providing that ere we go, which is very powerful. So the Greenskins are piling through. I have to send in some Slayers to fighting against, like, high DPS units, which really, really sucks. My Slayers are going to take a ton of damage, but the Rune Lord's going to be falling back. I was able to secure this position against the Goblin Wolf Riders by pulling in some Longbeards. Right now, you can see this entire flank is pretty much overwhelmed, right? So it's very important when you're playing Dwarfs to kind of take big overhead views at times to just look at where the threats. There's barely any threats over here. The Dragonback Slayers, unfortunately, did have to intercept some Skulkers, but they'll cut them to pieces. It shouldn't be too big of a problem. But I'm going to be rotating all my guns over to this area right now on the other side of the battlefield and trying to kind of corral off and start shooting some of these big targets. So the BUGMAN's Rangers are able to fall back. The Thunders fall back as well. Here we have Savage Orc Biggins actually fighting Longbeards, and these guys were already beat up, and they're putting a big dent in my Longbeard. So I was like really surprised. I thought the frontline fight would be super easy. I was like, oh, he has like no armor piercing, but nonetheless, the Savage Orcs definitely hit pretty hard, and that physical resistance is quite good. So right here, he gets a little bit overzealous with Warzog. The Baconator does move forward to attack my Thunders, which isn't a bad choice, but now we have a massive kill box. So the Dawi Thunder, the BUGMAN's Rangers, all these guys are going to be shooting in, and you can see Warzog is going to start taking a massive pounding. The infantry fight here isn't going terrible. My Slayers, unfortunately, are being taken down to the last man here. We actually do break off some of those Savage Orcs, which were pressuring my Thunders with the Master Rune and Wrath Rune on those guys. Yeah. Dwarf Warriors here are going to be holding off Savage Orc Biggins and actually trading pretty efficiently. Now that the Wa is gone and kind of the initial pressure of the Greenskins was worn down, I seem to be able to stabilize a little bit. So Warzog's going to be trying to run, but old Deadeye has got his sights set on Warzog. You can see the Bacon's going to be trying to scoot and move out of here, but he does get taken out by those Thunders right there, and down he goes. So the Baconator has fallen. Now the missile line is still in pretty good shape. The Rusty Airs and these Goblin Archers and Orc Archers are just going to be shooting in, trying to snipe out my Rune Lord in retaliation for me taking out the Baconator over there, and I'm definitely taking a little bit of damage. Right now I'm going to be falling back. The kill box of these Thunders just mowing down the Night Goblins and all these other troops that are trying to advance here, so that's definitely quite good. Longbeards with Great Opens really just kind of a bastion for my back line here, so finally we formed a bit of a kill box. Whenever the Greenskins try and come in here, whatever gets into this area is just getting mowed down by massive Thunder Fire. You can see the Skulkers are pretty much next, and this Rune Lord, even though he's not like a combat hero, he does have 120 armor and 45 melee defense, so he's not going to be a pushover against like low AP units. Granted, those were Skulkers. So some of those Goblin Wolf Riders do unfortunately get into the back line, but BUGMAN's Rangers are no pushovers. They're used to scouting the mountains and hills and dealing with such vanguards of Wolf Riders, so hopefully these guys will be able to deal with the Wolf Riders here in the back. And the Goblin Big Boss is pushing in, but he's taking massive fire from the Thunders. Balance of Power is just dead even still. I mean, it's very, very close. Here I was able to break his formation, so these Longbeards with Great Opens are going to be piling in, but a massive group of Orc Boar Boy Biggins is coming in for a huge charge, so all my guns, all my bows are going to be switching onto these guys, but this is not a good situation. Definitely something that we are not excited for. So, massive armor-piercing Orcs coming in. A couple are going to get Last Samurai on the charge, but for the most part, they're going to get in there and do some pretty good damage. So the Dragonback Slayers were able to fend off the Goblin Wolf Riders from that group of BUGMAN's Rangers, and now, thankfully, the Thunders, like I said, Dwarf missile units are sturdy with 28 melee defense. Dragonback Slayers are going to be piling in. I get a Master Rune of Wrath and Rune, which is going to help drag these guys down, and the Slayers are going to be rushing in to cut down these piggies, and you can see a couple of the boars are going to be dragged down in the retreat, and now the Thunders are able to stabilize a little bit, and we might be able to shoot those guys down. So, realizing the Rusty Airs and all these other Goblin Archers and, Orc Archers, they're Orcs. The Orc Airboys in the back are just doing a ton of damage to my Slayers. I am going to be pulling back my Slayers in a moment, despite the fact they have the Bronze Shields. It's still, you don't want them taking that. And I'm going to be switching my BUGMAN's Rangers to take down the Rusty Airs. So you can see a massive volley coming in, just focusing down these filthy Goblins. And these guys are definitely going to be taking a lot of damage from the elite bows of the BUGMAN's Rangers. So we're wearing down those guys. They're out of ammo anyway, so it's a little bit late. So a bit of a mistake on my part, but nonetheless, we are going to get them down. And another onslaught of Savage Orcs is coming in the hills. Night Goblins have ambushed these Thunders and should be able to shake them off. These Dwarf Warriors just in a fight for their lives against these Savage Orc Biggins. Just a brutal, grinding fight. The Thunders here are going to be switching their sights onto the Goblin Big Boss. But look at that. The Bounce Power is actually going in my opponent's favor a little bit. I'm definitely falling behind, and just the tides and tides of Orcs just kind of keep coming back in. And this heavy fire is really taking out my Dragonback Slayers. And, I wanted to put my Thunders on them, but I felt like it was more important to break the front line and kind of stabilize the backline situation. And then from there, with the regeneration on the BUGMAN's Rangers and some of those other troops, maybe I could figure out the situation. So these proud Dawi Thunders are actually able to fend off these Night Goblins. So the Night Goblins are going to be chased off. Some Longbeards with great weapons coming in to reinforce them. And from here, I'm going to be reforming ranks on these Thunders and shooting downtown. So the Orc Airboys are now getting some pretty good, they're getting some decent damage in on the Thunders. But of course, I have shields on these guys. That's what's so cool about a lot of the Dawi missile units is they have shields across the board. So yeah, you can see there's going to be a bit of a resurgence here from the Orcs, a lot of troops coming back, but there's also a lot that are going to be running away. But the Savage Orcs do clean up those Dwarf Warriors after a very just brutal long fight. The Longbeards are going to be rushing in to meet their doom at the hands of the Savage Orcs, but nonetheless, we're kind of grinding them down. The Thunders providing some very nice fire. Thankfully, they're able to shoot over their brethren, which seems to be pretty effective here. But yeah, those Savage Orcs are just like lawnmowers. I mean, they mowed those guys down. Granted, I only had a couple left. So now another onslaught of Greenskins is coming in, and the Dwarves are going to be making their last stands. Right now, I'm completely out of ammunition on these BUGMAN's Rangers. Over here, I have the Dragonback Slayers and the BUGMAN's Rangers. I was so glad I brought these guys. They're actually quite powerful against these type of troops. They're going to be charging in to meet these nasty Skulkers head on. I do also have the Dragonback Slayers rushing in, which is going to be a very, very nice boon, getting that extra DPS in there. And if these piggies do decide to charge, the Dragonback Slayers should be able to intercept them. So, if you look here, the Dragonback Slayers are pretty beat up, but the BUGMAN's Rangers are just beating the hell out of these Goblins. You can see these rugged veterans of the Dawi Vanguard Force here just going to be fighting these guys tooth and nail here in the pits. Very thematic stuff in terms of Warhammer lore. In the back, the piggies are going to be trying to get around, but the Thunders they've learned their lesson from earlier in the battle, and they're going to be turning about face and just gunning these guys down. The Orc Boars are just getting shot to pieces by the Thunders. They're getting so damn close, they're wavering. They're at 13, and it looks like they're going to get in, but at least I got a couple volleys off that time, so that was a little bit better. BUGMAN's Rangers here have had to stand and fight, but the Rusty Airs came into melee. I mean, both of us are throwing everything we have at the wall right now. We're like, just fight to the bitter end. And you can see here the Rune Lord is going to be engaging the Goblin Big Boss, who does have the Sword of Antihero. Savage Orcs are coming in from the back, but these Thunders are going to turn, and unfortunately they're a little bit spaghetti just because I was doing it in a panic, right? But they're going to be shooting at these big ones and hopefully getting some damage in. The real name of the game, though, is the BUGMAN's Rangers. These guys are just MVPs, just pushing through and fighting these Greenskins to the end, and it looks like they're able to clean up the Goblins pretty efficiently. The Goblins really just don't have the DPS to kind of punch through the regeneration of these BUGMAN's Rangers, and also they do have obscenely high melee defense, which is like pretty close to 40, so that's very nice. So here, the Goblin Big Boss actually does get spanked a little bit by the Rune Lord. BUGMAN's Rangers are fighting up against Savage Orcs, which is definitely not a fun situation, but the Savage Orcs are getting a little bit tired out here, and there's just a throng of Dwarves coming back in. I still have 2 Thunders, which are very nice, provides me with some Overwatch fire to take out these high-value targets like Goblin Big Bosses. And from here, it's looking a little bit grim for the foul Grobby here and the Urks and all that kind of stuff. So Rune Lord and company here and the BUGMAN's Rangers, Slayers are charging in. The rear charge is really going to buckle these Orc Airboys, especially when their leader is dead. Of course, Greenskins are one of those factions that really do suffer with leadership issues. So the Orc Airboys are going to be charging in as well, taking some fire from the glorious Thunders. And you can see they're getting picked off, heads are flying. And it looks like the proud Dawi are going to take the day against the eternal foe here, the Greenskins. Well, I don't know if it would be like eternal, right? Because back in the day, I guess they've had a ton of different enemies, many grudges in the Great Book. But here we are able to break the Greenskins. You can see the balance of power definitely shifting in my favor. And the last of the Greenskin tide is going to wash upon the bucklers of the BUGMAN's Rangers. So very well played to my opponent. That was a super fun game. And honestly, I thought I was very built around Black Orcs. I was like, okay, Black Orcs, I can wear them down. There's going to be less numbers. I can isolate them with mass focus fire in the ruins and have the Longbeards come in the reinforcements and take them out. But the White Army kind of caught me off guard. I really didn't think the Savage Orcs would get that many kills. I mean, 97, 60, 77, 122, 151 on the Savage Orc Biggins. So that really caught me off guard. Those guys did a great job, especially with the Bonewood staff kind of perpetually buffing those guys. My opponent also had some really nice sneaky tactics, getting those Goblin Wolf Riders through the seams and kind of penetrating my missile line a couple times. That really almost cost me the game. So that was just a crazy fun game. Very unorthodox build for my opponent, but it almost worked. I mean, that was a close one. So very well played to Hey there. Look forward to running into you again on ladder, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this Dwarf vs. Greenskin showdown. Have an excellent night, guys, and take care.